thank you for meeting me today. My name is Erin O'Brien. I am a STEM educator at Morgan Middle School, and I'm here to go over the individualized education plan process with you. This is a comprehensive guide to an individualized education plan. We're going to start with reviewing language that you'll see throughout the process, along with the referral, evaluation, and eligibility process, and then we'll talk about components of the IEP, and then go through some student and parent involvement tips. All right, so let's get started. First, the language. You'll see 4 major phrases: free, appropriate public education, least restrictive environment, prior written notice, and procedural safeguards. Free appropriate public education is identified an idea as an education entitled to your student, which is free of charge, available to all students, and is appropriate to your student's needs. This means that if it is identified that your student will receive educational support with an IEP plan, that they get all of the appropriate resources needed to meet their individualized education goals. Okay, the next one, least restrictive environment. So you'll hear this talking about the best sort of plan to ensure that your student is able to meet their educational or development goals. This is not necessarily a room. When you hear environment, you maybe think of a room or location, but this is just talking about the plan in general. So your student may be integrated with other students in their general education classroom, but maybe they'll receive modifications or accommodations to support their goals or their needs. Another thing they can do is maybe throughout the day they'll go and see a specialist, taking time out of their general education classroom and focus on certain subjects. Or maybe they'll have a specialist or maybe like an interpreter or someone to help them take notes during the day for academic support. So those are just a few examples, but as you're going through your individualized education plan, your IEP team will come up with some solutions and some suggestions that best fit your students' needs. The next thing is prior written notice. Before any decision is made, guardians will receive notification of changes that will be made or changes that are suggested. The last one we'll talk about is procedural safeguards. This is a packet of information that informs guardians of what their legal rights are, how they can best advocate for their students, as well as what your school will and will not provide regarding services. So now we've gone through the language, let's talk about the referral process. Okay, so prior to receiving special education services, a referral of evaluation of eligibility is required. A referral may be submitted by anyone at any time, though the formal process for evaluation of eligibility is slightly different according to the physical age of your child. So for early intervention, ages birth through 3, most of the referrals will be done through your pediatrician or from a specialist referred to you by your pediatrician. After that, ages 3 through 5, so your child will most likely be in preschool through kindergarten. The school district is responsible to poll the district, poll the school, poll the community, sending out letters to request if you think that your child does need special education services. That is one portion of the referral process here. And the last one could just be a letter from a guardian. It could be inquiry from another educator, or maybe it's someone in the community who thinks that maybe your student could be eligible for special education services. All of these referrals will go through an official referral process, and that just means that the special educator will initiate a written referral. After that official initiation, within 15 days, the guardian will receive an assessment plan and a copy of the procedural safeguards. They will have 15 days after that to respond with approval and consensus to continue with the evaluation for eligibility. After that, the school has 25 days to make a determination of approval for evaluation eligibility. So let's talk a little bit more about what that evaluation process looks like. And excuse my dogs in the background if you can hear them. I do apologize. So similar to the referral process, the evaluation for eligibility may differ according to your child's age, as well as if your child is in private or public school. So let's talk about what the general process is, because I think that's really what we'll consider today. And then if you have questions post that, we can talk about this. So the general process for evaluation is as follows. As I explained, this is independent of which type of institute your student is attending. We'll talk about those variances according to private and homeschool in a second. So after receival of referral and consent from guardians, your child may be screened or evaluated based on your concerns. So evaluation will consider data from pediatricians or specialists. It will consider data from the general educator, from maybe a special educator. It will consider anything that you provided regarding discussion. And then if your child is over the age of 8, they will be included in possibly the eligibility meeting, which we'll talk about later. Now, if your student is going to a private school, the private school can conduct this evaluation. However, any services they receive will be through the public school system. So that means that for a private school, your student will have an individualized service plan that explains the services that they will receive from private school or from public school. And if your child is homeschooled, evaluation will be completed by the public school system or the public school district, and if found eligible and you do choose to receive those services, your student will need to be enrolled in public school. Okay, so let's talk about the eligibility determination. Now, it seems kind of complicated here, but the basic idea is that in order to be eligible, your student must meet 2 criteria. They must be diagnosed with at least one of 13 disability categories defined in IDEA, which I've outlined here in this disabilities categories box. And they must show evidence of a limited progress deficiency of cognitive processing, delay of developmental abilities. They must show emotional disturbance or behavioral disturbance, but all of these things must adversely affect the learning or the learning environment. So let's say that your student has been diagnosed with ADHD, but they are performing well in school. They are not going to be eligible for an individualized education plan or special education services in that way, but they may be eligible for a 504 plan, which is something that is kind of like a short term to address any behavioral concerns that you have within the school day. So let's talk about the eligibility and how this is determined, because the evaluation process does require that all of that information provided in the evaluation and in the referral is reviewed by a team. And the team consists of administrator, the guardian, it will consist of a special educator, the general educator, any specialists that were identified, as well as if your student is over the age of 8, they may be asked to join and kind of give some input through this eligibility evaluation meeting. You will receive prior written notice, as explained before, that evaluation has been completed and that we have identified if your child is eligible or not for services. You will also receive, again, the procedural safeguards, and then you'll receive an evaluation report. The evaluation report consists of a statement of eligibility determinations with signatures from each person who was providing data or input to the evaluation. It will discuss the assessments made along with the data, and then it will talk about the effects of the disability or other pertinent information which may be helpful in creating an individualized education plan. So if your student has been determined as eligible for services, we will work with you to create the IEP. The IEP components include a lot of information. So it will include information about accommodations, modifications. It will include anything about a transportation plan and discussing the least restrictive environment. Maybe your student needs to go to a different location to receive services that aren't offered in our specific public school location, or as we talked about before, if your child is homeschooled or in private school, maybe they will need to be transported to that location, maybe to the school for those services. The IEP will also include a list of goals that we have for your student, either academic, behavioral, emotional, developmental, whatever is identified as eligible for special education services. Something I did want to highlight here also is that you will have an IEP for each identified disability. So if your child has ADHD and needs additional assistance with their behavior, they will have possibly two IEPs, one discussing the learning portions of the ADHD, which may be adversely affecting their academic goals, along with a behavioral modification plan to help address those concerns and close the gap between the goals that we want them to achieve and the progress that they have now. So in talking about progress, the IEP will also give a list of what our goals are annually. We will review those in an annual meeting, along with incremental meetings. According to IDEA, the minimum suggested is quarterly, so we will have a quarterly progress monitoring meeting. Through each of these meetings, the entire IEP team is required to be there, and that's to make sure that we are discussing all of the goals that we have for your student, that we have considered any changes that need to be made, or that we have addressed. Maybe your child has met all the goals that they have, maybe you have additional goals, or maybe that's something that we can sort of drop off this IEP or maybe expand on. And so these reviews are really important for the entire team to meet together to identify consensus for where we are in the development and academically and functionally for your child. Some examples of additional services or additional related services that might be identified in the IEP are speech therapy or language pathology. Maybe your child needs help in the classroom with mobility. Maybe they need the classroom to be set up a little bit different in order to ensure the least restrictive environment. Maybe they need additional home care for medical assistance or physical therapy. And then there's also a couple of things offered to the parents, including parent counseling and training, that could be examples of related services that could be outlined in the individualized education plan. All right, that brings us to the guardian and student involvement section of this handout. Let's talk about some things that are required by guardians for involvement within the IEP process. And of course, we talked about before the authorization to proceed. That is definitely required for every decision outlined by the team. We also ask for your input for the evaluation process as well as the development process for the IEP and attending all of the IEP meetings. Some additional things that are helpful for guardian involvement, just to keep communication open among the team and with your student, is to know and understand procedures within your state and district about policies so that you can advocate for your child, ensuring that they have the best accommodations and modifications for their goals. The next thing is to understand their goals and stay informed about your student's progress, and provide feedback to educators and service providers as we're going through the school year, at the annual meeting, at the quarterly meeting, and even throughout the school year in incremental times. And then attend a support group to understand more about your child's needs and network with other families to build a community of support for you, your child, and family. And remember that this individual education plan is empowerment so that your child can achieve their academic and development goals.